Most people who quit investing don't quit because they lost money. They quit because they got bored. They put money in for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and the account just sort of sat there, barely moving. So they stopped. And here's the brutal part, they quit right before the magic was about to start. There's a specific year, a year where your money stops crawling and starts running, where the growth on your account in a single year finally out earns everything you put in that year yourself. And almost nobody makes it there because that year tends to land somewhere around year 11. And the early years, somewhere around year 5, are exactly where willpower runs out. They sold you a graph, a nice smooth curve that goes up and to the right forever. What they conveniently left off that graph is how flat, how dead, how boring the first few years actually feel when it's your real money and your real patience on the line. You've heard the phrase, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. It's stitched on pillows, it's on every finance guru's slide, and it is true. But the way it gets sold to you is a lie of omission. They show you the explosion at the end. They never show you the long, quiet fuse. Here's the thing nobody puts on the pillow. Compounding is not a smooth ride. It is shaped like a hockey stick. Long, flat handle, then a sudden, sharp blade. And for the first several years, you are living on the handle, the boring part, the part where it genuinely feels like you're getting nothing for your money. I call this the compounding cliff. Not a cliff you fall off, a cliff the curve climbs. There's a point where the line stops being gentle and suddenly bends upward hard. Before that point, you are basically just a person putting money in a box. After that point, the box starts paying you more than you pay it. And the whole game, the entire game, is just staying in the chair long enough to reach the bend. That's it. That's the secret the pillow forgot to mention. You're not being asked to be a genius. You're being asked to be patient through the most boring part, which is also the part right before the payoff. Now, that famous line, the eighth wonder of the world, he who understands it earns it, he who doesn't pays it. That gets credited to Albert Einstein. Smart sounding, right? Here's your first honest note of the video. There is zero solid evidence Einstein ever said it. Historians have looked, it's almost certainly made up, slapped on his name to sound smart, which is kind of perfect, honestly. The most famous quote about compounding is itself a fake that grew bigger every time someone repeated it. But the real story, the actual origin of understanding this stuff, is way more interesting than a bumper sticker quote. And it comes from a bunch of merchants in a cold, wet trading city, Amsterdam. The 1600s. The Dutch are running the most sophisticated money machine on earth at the time. They've got the world's first real stock exchange. They're trading shares, bonds, annuities. And an annuity back then was a simple deal. You hand over a lump of money and you get a small payment every single year for the rest of your life. Now, the question that kept these merchants up at night was simple but deadly. How much should one of these annuities actually cost? Charge too little, you go broke paying people for decades. Charge too much, nobody buys it. They needed the math, and nobody had it yet. Enter a man named Johan de Witt, Grand Pensionary of Holland, basically the chief political figure of the Dutch Republic, and also a serious mathematician. In 1671, he writes a treatise putting real probability math behind the price of these life annuities. He's working alongside the great astronomer Christian Huygens, and ideas bouncing out of correspondence with Blaise Pascal and Pierre de Fermat. These men are inventing the actuary, the person who prices time and risk for a living. And buried inside their calculations, they bump into something almost spooky. When they ran the numbers on these long dated payments, the thing that dominated the answer wasn't the interest rate, it was the time, the sheer number of years. A tiny yearly payment stretched over a long enough life ballooned into a number that felt completely out of proportion to where it started. The merchants could feel it before they could fully explain it. Time was the lever, not the rate. The rate was the easy part. Time did the heavy lifting. They just had the patience and the math to actually see it. Alright, let's stop with the stories and put real numbers on this cliff because this is where it gets undeniable. I want you to picture a totally ordinary plan. You invest $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year, and we'll assume a 7% average annual return, which is a reasonable long run number for a broad stock market index after inflation is a bit lower. But 7% nominal-ish is a fair planning figure. Now here is the one number that matters more than any other in this whole video, the crossover. The year your account's own growth in that single year earns more than the $6,000 you contributed that year. Once growth beats your contributions, the machine is officially doing more work than you are. Watch year one. You put in $6,000. Your growth for the year is roughly $200. 200. After 12 months of discipline, the market handed you about the price of one nice dinner. This is the moment people look at their statement and quietly think, what is even the point of this? Year 3. You've now got somewhere around $19,000 in the account. Your growth that year is roughly $1,200. Better. But you put in 6,000. So you're still doing about 5 times more of the work than your money is. You are still very much the engine. The money is just along for the ride. Year 5. Balance is around $36,000. Growth that year is about $2,200. Getting warmer, but you contributed 6,000. Your money is now pulling maybe a third of the weight. Most people never even get here. The average person has already drifted away by now, convinced it isn't working. And then watch the growth keep climbing. Year 8, the single year growth is about 4,000. Year 9, around 4,800. Year 10, around 5,600. And right around year 11, with the balance pushing toward $100,000, that single year's growth finally clears 6,400 and tops the 6,000 you put in. Right there, the lines cross. Your money out earns you. That's the cliff. That's the bend in the stick. Let me be honest about my numbers here because this gets fact checked. The exact crossover year wiggles with your return assumption. At 7% on a fixed monthly contribution, the crossover lands right around year 11. Push to a higher return and it slides a little earlier. A lower return pushes it later toward year 10 at 6% and year 15 at 5%. But the window is real, and for most ordinary plans, it's roughly year 10 to year 12. Now fast forward and feel the other end of the curve. Keep that same 500 a month going. By around year 30, you've personally put in about $180,000. But the account is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 600,000, meaning more than half of that pile, the majority of your wealth, is money your money made. You only fed the first part. Here's the part that flips everything you've been told. You probably think the crossover year depends on how good an investor you are. Pick better funds, chase a higher return, and you'll reach the magic faster, right? That's what the gurus selling you the hot strategy want you to believe. It is mostly wrong because you're putting in a fixed monthly amount. The crossover year barely moves when your income changes. Watch this. The person investing 500 a month and the person investing 5,000 a month. Their crossover year is almost identical. The big earner just has bigger numbers on the same exact curve. The shape doesn't care how rich you are. Read that again because it's the whole video. The compounding cliff is not a wealth thing. It's a time thing. A barista contributing steadily hits their crossover in the same year a surgeon contributing steadily hits theirs. The surgeon's numbers are fatter. The timeline is the same. Time is the great equalizer here, exactly like those Dutch merchants found. And the rate of return, the thing everyone obsesses over. It nudges the crossover by a year or two. That's it. The difference between a decent boring index fund and some clever handpicked strategy might move your cliff from year 11 to year 10. People blow up their entire plan chasing that 1 year. They'd be better off just not quitting. So here's the villain, finally out in the open. It was never your income. It was never your fun choice. It was never some secret the rich kept from you. The thing standing between you and the eighth wonder is the boredom of the early years, the quiet, the nothing happening. That's the gatekeeper. And almost everyone hands it the keys and walks away. There's a cruel irony baked right in. The early years feel like the time you can safely skip because so little is happening. But those are the exact years doing the slow, invisible setup for the explosion. You're not paying for nothing in those early years. You are prepaying for years 11 through 30. You just don't get the receipt until later. So what do you actually do with this? First thing, and it's almost stupidly simple, mark your crossover year. Sit down, figure out roughly when year 10 to 12 of steady contributions lands for you, and write that date down somewhere you'll see it. Give the boring part a finish line, a specific date you're aiming to cross, no matter what. Because here's the psychology. People don't quit marathons at mile 25. They quit at mile 9 when it hurts and the end feels imaginary. If you know mile 26 exists and roughly where it is, you push through mile 9 differently. Your crossover year is your mile 26. Name it and the boring years stop feeling pointless. Second, and this one is the real lever, automate it. Set up the contribution to pull from your account on payday before you ever see the money, before willpower ever enters the room. The single biggest threat to reaching the cliff is a human being deciding, month to month, whether to keep going. Take the human out of it. Think about why the early years are so dangerous. The growth is tiny, so there's no emotional reward to keep you motivated, which means you're running on pure discipline at exactly the moment discipline gets the weakest payoff. Automation solves that perfectly. The boring years run themselves. You don't have to feel inspired. You just have to not cancel the transfer. Third, stop checking the balance for a number. In those early years, the balance will demoralize you. It's designed to feel slow. Instead, track one thing, your contribution streak. Months in a row without pausing. That number always goes up. It's fully in your control. And it's the only number that actually predicts whether you reach the cliff. And one practical guardrail. Build a small emergency cushion in plain cash first or alongside so that when life throws a flat tire or a surprise bill, you're not forced to stop your contributions to survive the month. The number one reason people pause before their crossover isn't doubt. It's a cash emergency that the automation couldn't absorb. Now let me steelman the other side because I'm not here to sell you a fairy tale. Is it always exactly year 11? No. If you have to stop contributing for a year, because you lost your job, the math shifts. If markets have an ugly stretch right when you start, your early curve looks even flatter than my example, and the cliff comes later. This is a pattern, not a guarantee with a date stamped on it. And the honest truth is, the crossover is a psychological milestone more than a financial cliff edge. Nothing magically unlocks at midnight. The money was compounding the whole time. In year one, just like year 10, the crossover is just the moment it becomes visible enough that you finally believe in it. The math didn't change. Your ability to see it did. I'll also be square with you about returns. 7% is a planning assumption, not promise. Real markets go sideways for years sometimes. There are real 10-year stretches in history where stocks went basically nowhere. So don't treat the cliff like a train arriving on a schedule. Treat it like a season that's coming, even if you can't circle the exact day on the calendar. So here's what I'd actually do in my own account if I was starting today. I'd pick one boring, broad, low cost index fund and I'd set the automatic transfer the same day I set up the account. So there's no gap where I can talk myself out of it. Then, and this is the real trick, I would deliberately not look at the balance for the first couple of years. I'd check the contribution streak, not the dollar amount, because I know myself. I know that in year two, if I stare at a number that's barely moved, some dumb little voice is going to whisper that there are better, faster things to do with that money. And that voice is the single most expensive thing I will ever listen to. So I'd build my whole system around just never giving that voice a vote. Automate, ignore, and let year 11 come to me. So here's the one idea I want to leave bolted into your head. The eighth wonder of the world is real, but it's got a velvet rope in front of it. And the rope is the boring years, the flat handle of the hockey stick. Almost everybody who could have been wealthy turned around and left while standing in that line, six steps from the door. You don't need a higher income to reach the cliff. You don't need a genius strategy. You don't need to time the market. You need to find your crossover year, automate your way to it, and refuse to quit in the quiet part. That's the entire trick. The merchants in Amsterdam figured it out 350 years ago. Time is the lever, patience is the price. The curve you paid for is waiting on the other side of the boredom. Most people pay the price and walk away 1 year early. Don't be most people. Mark the year, automate the boring, and stay in the chair. Regular people, real wealth, no gatekeeping. Subscribe to Slime's Wealth Academy, and I'll see you in the next one.